Let's hear an applause, a big applause for the Joomla architect.
Okay, so it's the last session of the day. Everybody still awake? Right, a little bit? You didn't have too much coffee or all that? I noticed being here the last 2 days, you guys eat a lot. What was it that I had at dinner today? Moussaka, right? So he was saying, you want a little bit moussaka. I was like, yeah, that's a great dish, Greek dish. Everybody eats it here, so give me a little bit of moussaka. I have a picture of it. It was this big. That's moussaka for a whole week. If I eat all that, I would not be sleeping. So I took a little. I think I insulted photos by not taking enough, but okay. This is, how do you call that photos? Yeah, weak saka, okay. Anyway, first presentation. Tomorrow we're doing a workshop about Nooku. Today I'm going to try to talk at a level that everybody can understand. If at some point you go like, hey, what is that guy talking about? He totally lost me. You can stand up and start jumping up and down. I will see it, I hope. And I'll try to re-explain what I'm talking about. Okay? What I want to talk to you about is not about what Joomla can do today. There are many people here to share knowledge about what it can do today. I'm very interested in talking and showing you what we're working on to make Joomla or open source or web applications do tomorrow. Why is that important? Because the problems of today, or the solutions we have today, were for problems we had five years ago. We also need to start thinking about, what about tomorrow? So I titled this presentation, The Future of Joomla. It's a bold statement. I like bold statements. And I'm actually going to show you what we're working on. So first of all, I want to tell you a little bit about Nooku and how it started and how it has grown. But first of all, I want to tell you what Nooku isn't. Because I've noticed that a lot of people have ideas and perceptions about what we're doing. And they talk about that, and that's great. But there are a few things that we're definitely not. And I'm going to mention 3 things. First of all, we are not a product. We're not something that you download and install, and if it doesn't work, you throw away. We're not something like that you get off a shelf, that you consume, and then you're done with it. We don't cost money. We're not a product. We're also not a fork. A fork in open source, it's not something that you eat with. Right? You can actually eat my moussaka with a knife and fork, being the gentleman that I am. It's not a fork, which means it's not actually based on something else. It's new technology. It was built from the ground up, from the first line of code until the 10,000 lines of code that we have today. And third, it's not a CMS. Been there, done that, got the t-shirt, time to do something else. The challenges that we as a Joomla community have are bigger than solving CMS problems. And we have good tools for that. We have Joomla, we have WordPress, we have Drupal. We have many tools to solve and create CMS-driven websites. I'm going to show you what problems we're trying to solve. So, what is Nooku all about? Well, I asked a few people in our community, what do you believe that Nooku is all about? And I got some keywords back, which is nicely on the topic of Theo. Keywords, tags, whatever you call it. It's all about the web in the first place. Second, it is all about free and open source software. We sometimes forget that there's also this beast called free and open source software. It has values, it has a philosophy. We all are using it, and some of us, and hopefully a lot more in the future, are working on it, or should be working on it. Right? It's not just free as in free beer. However, the Greek beer is also fine. There's a lot of Belgian beer in Greece. I saw that yesterday. And there was a lot of free beer yesterday, so thanks for that. But free and open source software is also very important. Nooku is all about free and open source software. It's all about developers. And why? Because it's developers that write the technology, that create it. It's not the people that use it. It's the people that develop it, that write the code. Those guys are very important. Without them, you wouldn't be using Joomla today. It's about innovation. It's about thinking outside of the box, thinking outside of the limits, thinking outside of the conventions, and moving to new technologies, to new ways of solving problems. And that is damn hard. Because we're all human, right? We all have this antipathy with change. Change is something we don't like. If everything could stay the same as we know it, the world will be perfect. Unfortunately, the world constantly changes, and technology changes very rapidly these days. If you have it today, it's already changed tomorrow. So innovation becomes very important. Why? Because innovation in open source allows us to compete with any proprietary vendor and to be a lot better than him. Right? Joomla has taken 16% of the market in Greece. It has taken 2.5% of the market worldwide. How did it do that? Simply by evolving faster than any other proprietary vendor could do. And how do we do that? Well, we do that together. Right? We don't compete, we collaborate. Like I said, it's all about collaboration. It's about working together. If you have a solution for a problem and I can reuse your solution, then I don't need to redo it again. And we both win from that. It's about building a platform. It's not about building a framework or a CMS. It's about building a platform, something that can solve some bigger problems than the ones that Joomla solves today. And finally, or almost finally, it's about architecture. There are a lot of issues and challenges and problems with Joomla today. And you can try to look at those and then come up with solutions individually for each. I personally believe that the real answer, the real problem, is the architecture that is outdated. And if you want to solve those, and you go at your core problem is changing the architecture to be able to use modern technologies, and then you evolve from there. I have another one. A meritocracy. What is this all about? Who knows what a meritocracy is? Okay. You're all using open source software, and you don't know what a meritocracy is. I have proven a point here, and that is that there is not enough education in the Joomla community about how Joomla actually works, and I'll talk about that tomorrow during my opening talk. A meritocracy is the simple way how we work together. He who contributes most, he who gains the most merit, will have the most impact on the future of Joomla. It's not he who shouts the loudest, or he who is the biggest, or who can drink the most beer in the case of photos. It is he who contributes most. It's of course about technology and extensibility. Now, how did it get started? In 2007, actually around this time, 2007, was May, June, we sat together with a number of organizations that needed a multilingual solution for their websites. And we were discussing what was missing in Joomla 1.5. And a lot of big organizations were saying, well, if we're in a European context, and I'm talking about the United Nations, the Belgian police, Unilever, like large organizations, we need to be able to build websites in multiple languages. And at that time, I'll go one back. At that time, Joomfish wasn't available yet for Joomla 1.5, and a lot of organizations were saying, Joomfish is a great solution, but for our problems, it doesn't fit the bill. It doesn't do what we require it to do. So in 2008, working together with these organizations, we announced Nooku Content. And Nooku Content was, and still is, a multilingual extension for Joomla 1.5. And I'll explain later what we're actually going to do with that. We had a number of organizations that helped us fund the development of it, and we made it available as a commercial extension. That was our first step. We needed people and organizations to give us a little bit of money to help us create technology. Unfortunately, I don't have a magic tree where money can be just grabbed from, right? Everybody needs to find an income source to then create technology. If, however, some of you have such a tree, then I would love to learn how to grow it. So this is how we started. Now, I'm not going to explain this because we're actually going to move it into our new technology and make it publicly available for everybody. But Nooku Content was simply a way, and is simply a way, to make your website multilingual. That's it. It is being used by Unilever, United Nations, Belgian Police, and a number of partners we have worldwide. Now, when you're working with open source, and when you're developing software whatsoever, and you're doing it in the right way, you will always try to reuse what you already built. Right? That makes sense. You build a solution for a client, you build some code, and then you have a similar problem that comes up, so you're going to take that code, you're going to take that solution, make it a little bit more flexible so that you can reuse it. Developers call that refactoring, yes, of course, refactoring. And there is also a term for it, it's dry, keeping your code dry. Don't repeat yourself. Like, you write it once, and then you try to reuse it. So that's what we did. When we started working on Nooku Content, we created a solution, and we tried to create it in a dry way so that we could reuse parts of it. And those parts, we put into a separate something, which we announced in 2009. In 2009, we announced Nooku Framework. We basically took all the repeatable or reusable parts out of Nooku Content and put them in a separate framework that we made available publicly in the summer of 2009. That's not even 2 years ago. I'll go into that in detail a little bit later, but Nooku Framework is basically, we call it a new brain for Joomla. It's like the Joomla framework, but it's a lot smarter. And I'll show you why and how. Now, 2010, well, we had put Nooku Framework out there. We put it on SourceForge. And suddenly people started liking what we were doing. Right? We put the code out there, and people were downloading the code and doing stuff with it, and they had questions, and they wanted to interact, and they wanted to help. They wanted to contribute. So in 2009, we created a developer portal, which we call our Nooku Developer Portal. You can find that at nooku.assembler.org. We actually grew an open source community. We got interested developers in, and they came to us and said, hey, we want to help. How can we help? So we need a resource to collaborate on, and that's the developer portal. We are building an open community. That means a place where people can collaborate. And we do that at nooku.assembler.com, sorry. Small typo. This is not a place where you can download anything. This is a place where you can find raw code. If you're a developer, you can work with Git and SVN. That's where you can get all the stuff that we're working on. And if you know how that works, it's also the place where you can collaborate and contribute things back. 2011. So we built a framework. We built a community. And we had a growing list of contributors, people that were helping us building Nooku. In 2011, we took this all a step further, which is this year. It was announced a few months ago. We announced the Nooku platform. And the Nooku platform is a free and open source web application development platform. And I'm going to explain to you in 3 steps what that is all about. And how you can also use that for your project. Nooku platform. So this is not a CMS. This goes a step further. It's actually a level lower than a CMS. An open source web application platform. Now, what is that all about? Let's first define the problem that we're trying to solve. so that we know where we're going to. Well, the problem is as follows. Joomla is a CMS. Well, it pretends to be one. I actually claim that Joomla isn't a CMS because it doesn't solve any specific CMS problems. It doesn't have permissions, and it has permissions. It doesn't have versioning. It doesn't have taxonomy. It doesn't do workflows. It has comments within an extension. Trash management is basic. What Joomla is, and what Drupal is, and what WordPress is, they're site builders. They're the next generation of front pages, and like you work with front page, Microsoft front page. Like Joomla, in a way, is like the next generation of front page. It helps you build a site. Now, if you set up a Joomla and you install a number of extensions, this is always what you're going to get when you do something a little bit more advanced with K2, for example. You need permissions, you need versioning, you need taxonomy, trash management, workflows, and comments. Together, you create your website with that. You have solutions. You have Drupal, and you also have Mulajo, which is just trying to add a little bit to Joomla 1.6. You have WordPress. You have a few other choices within the PHP world. These are the choices that you have. You have proprietary solutions. A lot of people start building websites for clients with Joomla. And they solve one specific problem, that is a content-driven site. And a lot of you do that, right? Who builds websites for clients with Joomla in a commercial way? There we go. Which is probably almost everybody still here. Now, then you know this problem. So, you invested quite a lot in Joomla. You have a lot of experience building Joomla websites. You have a number of clients, and then suddenly a client comes to you and he says, hey, can we do like an intranet or an extranet? And I need document management. Right? And then I see a guy smiling over there already. And then you go like, yeah, well, you know, let's do a Joomla for that. So you take Joomla, and then you try to find yourself an extension in the extensions directory. You go through 7,000 of them to figure out which extension solves your problem. Right? You select 3 or 4, and you go to your client and you say, hey, you know, well, we do a Joomla. And here are 3 or 4 extensions that we selected that potentially help solve the document management problem. Let's test them. And the client goes, that's okay. I like this one best. So you implement the site with that extension. The site is almost done. You work for weeks. You go like, this is going to be a nice paycheck. You're happy. You're almost ready to buy your ticket for the Bahamas. Right? You go to the final meeting with the client. You demonstrate the site. And then the client goes, okay. But, you know, workflow-wise, that doesn't really work there. Can we like change it a little bit? And that templating idea there, don't like it. Plus, we need different user groups and more permissions on the front end to get it all done. And you go like, whoa. Whoa. Are you serious? This is Joomla, dude. Like, it doesn't do all that. Like, it does what it does right now, and all the rest it's not gonna do because I cannot start changing it. Problem there, you can take Joomla, you can put extensions in there, and you cannot extend the extensions. You cannot make them do what you want them to do. Right? And Max, is Max here? No, he's not here. He's there. I can joke a little bit, no pun intended, because he's fixing it. Here's another story. So, you build a great website with Joomla for a company, and you present it to the company. And then the company goes, nice, great, it's all there, it does what it needs to do, but can we add e-commerce to that? And then you go, oh shit. That means virtual market, right? Yeah. And Max is taking the responsibility to fix that problem by looking at what he has today and looking at modern technologies to help solve that problem. But today, virtual market is simply not easy to integrate. It's simply not easy to change, right? It solves a problem, but it's probably 80% of what your client needs. But when you try to add that 20%, and Max explained how he wants to do that in the future, you get stuck. Here's another one. So what I'm basically trying to say is, in the Joomla sphere, there are no real solutions for these problems. There are extensions, and that help you get there to a certain point. And then you get stuck. Here's another one. I want to do a project management system. Like I want to manage projects in my company or in my group or something like that. So, and I want to have it social. Right? Because this is the big term, right? It needs to be social. You know, your software is not social? Dude, you serious? So, social, Facebook and Twitter and all that. Ah, well, let's do a Joomla for that. And then again, all the questions that come up are the same. You still want permissions and versioning and trash management and taxonomy and workflows and discussions. But the main theme here is projects. The main theme here was documents. But all the other side features that you need are still the same. So you try to do that, same problem, right? You try Community Builder, you might try Joomla Social, and you get 80% of where you want. And then your client goes, great, but I want changes, and then you go, uh-oh. There is nothing out there that really does that. That's the problem that we're trying to solve. So defining the problem. Build a platform based on web standards and open source web technologies to allow you, with very useful and reusable components, build complex solutions with not too much knowledge. Break everything down in reusable parts. Break it down into a versioning solution, and a comment solution, and a document solution, and a file solution. All different parts that can work together. Right? So if somebody builds K2, and Fotis is actually thinking about doing that on Nooku, then Fotis will probably be reusing, like let's say, 70 or 80% of what is already out there, and he would add his very special Fotis sauce on top of it, which in Greece is sometimes a little bit spicy. And he would put a nice beer on the side, and you would have K2. If you then go, let's use K2 for my project, it doesn't really completely do what I need, then you or Fotis can add that to it without hacking it, without bumping against walls. You can just get it done. And all that with a lot less code. With what technologies? With PHP 5.2, with HTML5, with CSS3, with JavaScript. It's time we grow up. Right? Joomla 1.5 and 1.6 are still very much PHP 4. HTML5, nowhere there. CSS3, we're still playing with positioning and floating in CSS2, let alone that we evolved to CSS3. Most people haven't even heard about Flexbox models and solutions. JavaScript, shit, that's dangerous. Well, newsflash, the whole world is running JavaScript. It became hip and cool. They even put it on servers these days, and it's called Node.js. Time to learn new technologies, or you will be left behind. So how are we going to do that? Well, we're going to do that with 3 different, what we call projects, with 3 different technologies. First of all, our Nooku Framework. Our Nooku Framework is what we call a new brain for Joomla. It's not built on top of Joomla. It's built separate, and you can install it in Joomla as a plugin. It runs completely on its own. The cool thing is you can also, for example, use it in WordPress. We actually built a component and installed it in WordPress, and then initial proof of concept works. So imagine you build a component once, and then you use it everywhere. And it allows you to build extensions, better extensions, with more features and more power in less time. And I'll show you why. First of all, you write a lot less code. On the left side, the amount of code needed to build NinjaBoard 1.0. You know NinjaBoard? It's a forum extension for Joomla. In total, 40,000 lines of code. That's 30,000 lines of code and 10,000 lines of comments. built on the Joomla framework. On the right, the same thing, built on the Nooku framework. Code needed, 3,572 lines. That is 80% less. Imagine that you can build the same component with 80% less code, which also means 80% less time you need to invest to build it. That means 80% more time to actually focus on the features that your client needs. Imagine that, right? Imagine that 7,000 extensions in the jet suddenly have 80% less code. 2, flexibility. If there's one thing where we in Joomla are good at, it's competing. If there's one thing where we are very good at, it's building the same thing all over again, a little bit different. I present to you.
Do K2 uses Joomla core? We need to update your.
Yeah, I know, but okay.
This is fully native.
Proving the point.
Fully Nooku native.
I'll take K2 out. The point is still there. These are just 10 of the many CCKs. This slide is old. It's 2 years old. And that's why it's already updated. But still, there are 10 and today even 30 of these so-called CCKs. What does a CCK do? Well, it makes Joomla into a CMS. Right? But Joomla is a CMS. How did that happen? Well, like I said, Joomla is not really a CMS. So the Drupal guys had the same problem a few years ago, and somebody in Drupal went like, hey, if Drupal is a CMS, and we don't have versioning, and we don't have forms, and we don't allow content types, and there is no way of logging all that, then what are we? Well, shit, it's already called a CMS, so we need to call it something else then. So he came up with the name CCK, Content Construction Kit. You know what Drupal did? They built one content construction kit. They worked on it for a few years. They improved it. And then Drupal 7, they put it into the core. That's how open source is supposed to work. Now, what does Joomla do? Well, Joomla says, oh, these Drupal guys, they're smart. They have something called a CCK. We have the same problem. Let's also do our own CCK. Instead of doing one and working on that together, we did 30. And they're actually all the same, a little bit different. Now imagine that you could take all these CCKs, strip away 80% code, and make them reuse those common parts, so that each CCK is simply a little layer on top of all the common parts that they're using. That's a lot of power and a lot less code duplication. So how do you solve flexibility? By making it common and by working on it together. Here's another one. Security. This is the X-Force index. You know what the X-Force index is? No? Okay. So the X-Force index is an index released by IBM every quarter and every year. And it lists vendors, open source projects, technologies. And it lists a ranking of the amount of disclosures that are being found, security disclosures that are being found, relative to the amount of code that is in the wild. So the more code you have distributed, the more code you have used, the higher you will rank on your security disclosures. Right? Now, 2009, first quarter, first half, Joomla is ranking on the 10th place. And for the full year of 2008, Joomla was ranking on the 4th place. You can see that we're in good company. For 2008, you see Microsoft, Apple, Sun, Joomla, IBM, Oracle, Mozilla, Drupal, Cisco, Typo3. I call that good company. What does this statistic say? Well, one, we have a security problem, right? We are as secure as Microsoft, almost. Now, Microsoft is always on the top. We wouldn't have expected anything else. But still, you see Apple and Sun are before us, and then IBM is just behind us, which is interesting. What you also see is that Mozilla and Drupal and Typo3 are also in this list. So it's not just Joomla that has this problem. Also, other open source projects have the same problem. They are not secure, more secure than a proprietary vendor. This graph has a second story behind it. Second story is, we are damn popular. Right? There are a lot of people using Joomla. There are a lot of people using Drupal, Mozilla, and Typo 3. Otherwise, we wouldn't be in this list to start with. Now, OSM said, and it wasn't Ryan, who was the president at this time, but it was Elin Warren, the previous president. She said, the high rank is due to the third-party apps developed for Joomla and not due to the vulnerabilities in Joomla itself. And that's 100% correct. That's a true statement. Does that make it only the problem of the third-party developers? I don't think so. I don't even think that there is something like a third-party developer. In the end, we're all Joomla developers. We're all trying to work and improve Joomla. So we should also all work on improving our security problems. So what we're saying is, if we can write less code, we will lower the risk of vulnerabilities. And if we can put the security measures into the core, because a developer isn't per se a security expert, like a designer isn't per se a CEO expert, then we will solve a large part of this problem already. Then the developer doesn't know, the framework does it for him. Now imagine that you can write 80% less code. Then you drop out of this index like no tomorrow. Right? That's 80% less code in every Joomla website installed worldwide. Second problem that we're trying to solve. Third problem, sorry. So what we're trying to do is we're trying to combine the development speed of Ruby on Rails with the flexibility of something like a Symfony framework and the power of Zen into a new framework. That's what we're working on. And tomorrow in the afternoon during the workshop, I'm going to show you how we can build a whole component in an hour that has versioning, logging, and tagging with approximately 100 lines of code. And if you don't believe me, you need to come tomorrow. Second, now we have built Nooku Framework and we were working on extensions. And I wrote that a while ago, 2 days ago on the blog, then community happened. You know, people got interested. They wanted to help. So at the end of last year, we said, well, we want to start using the framework to rebuild Joomla, basically. We're going to take the framework and we're going to build a distribution of Joomla 1.5, and we're going to add some key features in there that are missing when you want to do a big website. Like a real big website. If you want to do that, you have other problems, like multi-site, multilingual, performance, caching. Those are things that Joomla doesn't do very well out of the box. So let's try to solve those. So we announced Nooku Server. And Nooku Server is a multi-site distribution of Joomla. What it does is, it allows you to manage as many sites as you want with one code base. Just one. And then you can create as many sites as you want on top of that. We are trying to build it in such a way that it's very flexible, but it's also very performant, and it can be installed in a very secure way. Does that mean that you can install this thing just on a shared host? You can, but you will miss a lot of the advanced features that are in there. This thing is being built to be installed properly on a virtual private server, on a dedicated server, where you have control, where you can set it up in a correct way. What does it do? Well, it's a multi-site, so you can put as many sites in there as you want, and you only have one code base. What does that solve? Well, it solves an enormous maintenance problem, right? Suppose that you're trying to build a network of sites, like say 100 or maybe 1,000, and you need to install 1,000 different Joomlas to do that. And then you need to maintain 1,000 different Joomlas separately. when an update comes out, you need to update 1,000 different physical installations, right? I'd rather go to the Bahamas and drink a beer or come to Greece and eat some moussaka. I want to solve that once and then be done with it. You need multi-site to do that. What we're also adding, and this is where my story started, we're also taking our multilingual solution and we're putting that in Nooku Server. And it will be freely available for everyone. So you're not only creating multi-site installations, you're also making those installations multilingual. You can add languages and you can start translating those. And finally, we call this cloud ready. It basically means we're trying to make this thing work and in such a way that you can play with the big guys. If you're doing, what's the name if you're doing Gazeta.com? Is that the name?
Allsports.gr is the new big one.
Allsports.gr? Onsports.gr? If you're trying to do installations like that, then a simple Joomla on a simple web server isn't gonna cut it. You need advanced caching. You need to be able to fine-tune your performance. You need to be able to monitor all that. So what we're trying to do is actually make Nooku Server do that. So that you, and if you know how it works, you can install it behind the reverse proxy of Varnish, for example, and it can deal with that. It gains performance by doing that. And it understands how that all works out of the box. Cloud ready. Now, these are the few screenshots, but I'm going to show you a live demo. This is actually the backend template that we completely redone. This template is using CSS3 so that you can very easily use it in a tablet. Here it's on an iPad. We're also working on optimizing the user interface so that it actually becomes easier and simpler to manage and edit the content in the article component. We're making a few optimizations here on the left. This is the menu manager here on the left. And can I push this? Nope. There it is. There we go. Here on the left, you see that we moved the selection of the menus here instead of a drop down here, which is a lot easier to use and a lot clearer for users. So that's Nooku Server. Now, if there's one thing that is a big pain when you develop web applications that are not necessarily websites, you need to be compatible with any and every web browser out there. And if there's one thing that is limiting innovation and is making you work 3 times harder, then is it all that browser testing. Because Microsoft Internet Explorer 9 only supports part of CSS3. They claim it's great, and it's probably great, but it doesn't do it. It doesn't do Flexbox. And it's beautiful to work with. All the other browsers do. So we're going, how do we solve that? Instead of accessing our web applications, our administrator part of those web applications, through a web browser, let's simply build a desktop application to do that. So we announced a little while ago Nooku Desktop. What Nooku Desktop does is, it allows you to take your Joomla out of the web browser, or your Nooku server out of the web browser. It allows you to create web apps. Why is that important? Well, because 5 years from now, we will probably not using web browsers anymore. It will be a thing of the past. And you already see that happening. What Google is doing, what Apple is doing with iOS, what Google is doing with Chrome OS. We're slowly building web applications that connect to the internet. If you saw the Google notebook, which only runs Google Chrome, which only runs web apps. You cannot install anything in there anymore. That's where things are going. That's where the future lies. That's where we need to try to innovate. So that's what we're trying to do. So what does it do? It's a client that you can install on Windows, on Mac, and on Linux that acts as a desktop application for your web application. I'll show it. How does it work? It's cross-platform. It's using technology built by Accelerator Titanium. In the core, there's a lot of HTML5 and CSS3 power, and it runs WebKit, which is a browser if you need browser functionality. It's native. What does that mean? You can use all the power of CSS3 and HTML5 to build very intuitive user interfaces without worrying about compatibility problems. Because you're only building it for one, and that's for Nooku Desktop, or for WebKit. Because all these things that you run in here can also run in Chrome or in Safari. They just don't play well with Internet Explorer and Opera and a few other browsers. And finally, it's more secure. Because you're accessing your web application through a desktop application that you have full control of. If you work in a browser environment, anybody can use that browser to browse to any website. If you have a desktop application that only connects to one web app, then you completely control that environment. It looks like this. What we did here is very simple. We built a connection manager. That connection manager allows you to make connections to different Nooku server installations. And this is what the backend looks like. If it's not a Nooku server, it will basically tell you that it cannot connect to it. And it auto-updates itself. So if you build a new version of the app, then all the apps that are out there will auto-update themselves. All right? This is what we are working on and what we believe is the future, or could be the future of Joomla. Now, 2012, next year, where are we going to? Well, first of all, what is our short time roadmap? We did an alpha 1 of Nooku 0.7 in 2011, Nooku server that is, with a lot of cleanup, that's done. We did an alpha 2 in March, we added the multi-site. We're finishing alpha 3 right now with basically component refactoring. We're rewriting all the components in Joomla 1.5 to Nooku server and Nooku Framework components. We're going to continue that with the next alpha, and that's going to be end of July. And then the plan is to do beta of 0.7 in September. What you will get then is basically a web application platform with a number of components that we have already pre-built that all run Nooku server, Nooku Framework, sorry. Right? So it will work a little bit like a Joomla, but eventually we're going to take all those little Joomla pieces like com banners and com web links and all that. We're going to take those out. We don't need that. What we need is the powerful stuff like versioning and logging and file management and user management and taxonomy and categorization. All those reusable parts that you need to build powerful web applications. Could you eventually use that to build something like a CMS? You probably could. This could potentially be the basis of Joomla 2.0, or maybe even 3.0. Are we interested in doing that? Not necessarily. It's not our goal. We're much more interested in providing all those reusable components so that you can build a very diverse type of web application. What does the future look like? Well, the future looks like this, Web 3.0. I'll demonstrate that tomorrow. If you're a developer and you know what Web 3.0 is, Nooku Framework allows you to get any little bit of information, any data that is out there, using JSON. And with a little bit of work also using XML. So imagine that you can connect to your Nooku server, and then instead of just browsing it as HTML, you can get the data out, the pure data out as JSON. And then build client applications, iPhone applications, or Android applications with that. REST, that's actually what this is all about, restitutional state transfer. It is using the web as it is intended to be used. REST, you know what REST is? Who knows what REST is? A little bit. For the people that don't know it, you use Facebook, right? You use Twitter, you use LinkedIn, you use Flickr. All these web services have what they call a REST interface. You can get your information, your photos, and your contacts, and your Twitters, and your tweets. You can get those out using REST. You can basically connect to Twitter and say, give me all my tweets of the last day. Or I want to tweet, so I send a tweet to Twitter instead of going to the website. I will use a client application to do that. You all use client applications to tweet, probably, right? Who still goes to the website to send a tweet? 1, 2. who uses applications to do that on his phone and on his desktop. A lot of you. This is what REST is all about. Imagine that you can submit an article to your site by building a desktop application specifically for that. Going mobile is very important. Doing CSS3 already showed that. Webhooks, I'll explain it tomorrow. Actually, basically, a webhook is a way of making websites communicate with each other. Wouldn't it be cool that we can import, export between sites without worrying about it? Ever tried to export your articles from one Joomla site to another? It's a pain, right? Well, we can automate that without code. Usability becomes important. You want to build user interfaces for your users and your clients that actually work. Versioning. Forms. How can I make it so that I don't need to, that I can easily create forms and deal with form-like data? HTML5. Widgets. How can I create a widget, install it on a site, and it gets data from another site? Attachments. And e-commerce. And where's Max? He left. This is where Max is working on, making Nooku, making VirtueMart 2 run on Nooku, so that we also have, oh, he's there, sorry Max. This is where Max is working on, or at least we are discussing, but he's eager to try it, so that's good. So that you can also do very nice e-commerce solutions that are flexible. Because then again, the problem with e-commerce is, and Max probably already told it in his presentation, e-commerce isn't only a shop. Right? A lot of people, when they do e-commerce, they need a web shop. Well, why? Like, if I want to deal with subscriptions from customers on my site, and I want to have people pay for that, I don't need a web shop. I need an e-commerce engine, so that I can basically have a form, and people fill in their details, and they pay, and it goes through a payment process, and it comes back, and people are in the site. Do we need a web shop for that? No. I need an e-commerce solution, an e-commerce engine. I need something flexible that also could be a web shop, but maybe I just need part of that whole solution. Flexibility is key there. Okay, so let's see if I have something more. I doubt it. Logging, Atom, explain tomorrow. Here, nice one. Auto updates. Isn't it the pain that you need to manually update your sites each time an update comes out? What if that could be automated? Okay, there we go. So that's what we're working on, and now I need to put my money where my mouth is, right? And actually show you something. So, first. What? Oh, okay, that's fine. So first, this is the administrator. So what I'm showing you here is a Nooku server installation. It runs on a Joomla 1.5 database. We didn't change the database at all. We changed most of it in the code, but not in the database. So you can, what you see here is that you have two sites. Site 1 and a default site, and you can add as many sites as you want. What is also important, what I'm showing you here is right from SVN. It was basically worked on an hour ago when I made a quick fix before my presentation. So it can explode. It hasn't done that yet. It simply sometimes goes wrong, but just a warning. So we log in into the site. What have we done? We're actually reworking most of the components. No, that's the thing with live demos. When you need it to work, it doesn't. Oh, there we go. So I'll show you a few things that we're working on. First of all, this thing runs Css3 and Flexbox. What does that mean? Well, very simply said, it scrolls the table itself in line. Now try that with CSS2. There's no going there, not with tables. You can do it with anything else, but with tables. What is also important is that I'll show 20, is that it stays at the bottom. You see the pagination at the bottom, it just floats up and it stays nicely at the bottom. What you have here is a web application user interface. This thing acts like a web application, like a desktop application. It doesn't act like a website. It doesn't scroll the whole page. It just scrolls the information in here, and all the rest stays nicely in its place. Yeah, you could try with iframes, but okay. Even then, it's not going to work this way. Oh well. Even then, it's not working. It's not going to work. So that's one thing that we're doing here. Another thing that we're, for example, doing is smart toolbars. You see the toolbar here? This toolbar knows that I can only click on new because I haven't selected anything. The moment I select something, they will know that I can delete it, publish, and unpublish it. These toolbars are also going to be connected to ACL. So even if you select something and you cannot do it, then it will not light up. You cannot click it. It's better usability with a little bit of JavaScript and a little bit more code. The thing is, you don't need to code this, and I will show you tomorrow. There's no extra code needed. It just works. What else? Thank you. Thank you. Well, this is new from this week, so I'm actually amazed that it all keeps working. What else are we doing? This is the refactored media manager. It's just refactored in user interface. It's not completely done yet. We're actually refactoring this whole component. It's going to be committed to Nooku server next week. What does that mean? We redid the media component and we made it reusable. What does that mean? And what problem does that solve? There is one component that you can use to deal with file uploads. So any other component that needs file upload and download functionality can just reuse it. And you can extend it and plug stuff into it to make it do a lot of cool things. Like, for example, if you want to upload videos and then send them to encoding.com to auto-encode them, then you could write a plugin to specifically do that. Right? So this is the flexibility thing. Build it once, solve it once, reuse it everywhere. Another thing that we're doing, let's see. We're reworking how the user interfaces work. Like, for example, here in this case, with web links, with categories, I'll show you another one, modules. So we're working on user interfaces. In this case, we're slowly moving towards a left side navigation with a tree-like structure or a list-like structure that you can use to do selections. In this case, you can switch between site and administrator instead of doing that here in your header, which is, a user doesn't really get that. A user understands this a lot better. Another thing that I can show you. We completely rewrote the caching. At the moment, caching is off. I'll turn caching on to show you. So let's go to system. Turn service on new size. There. This is also something we're changing. It's actually already done, but it's not in there. This is why I'm confused right now. We're going to completely redo. We're also about this one. It's not done, but what we're going to do is we're going to change how configuration management works. So at the moment, you can also only change configuration for site, and system and server. What we're actually going to do is we're going to move this here, so that you have a list of all the different things that you can configure. And components will be automatically added to that list when they have specific configuration settings. So there's just one place where you do your configurations. So I turned on caching. If I now go to a refactored component, for example, sections, then you will see when I go to my cache that there are a few extra caching types that have been added. So in this case, we added language caching. Joomla doesn't 1.5, and I'm not sure 1.6 don't do that. I could be wrong about 1.6. But we're basically caching the parsing of the ini files, which makes it a lot faster. We're doing template caching. So when a template is rendered, that is pre-cached. And we're doing database caching, which means we're caching database schemas and other stuff that sits in the database to speed it all up. This also works out of the box for any component that you build, and it gets you a 40% improvement, performance gain on components that you build with Nooku Framework. What else can you do? You cannot only see the caching groups, which is what you can do in 1.5 and 1.6, But you can also click on a group and then you can see all the keys that have been added, and then you can see the size, the hits, and when they were created and when they were last accessed. This allows you to start doing smart cache cleaning and things like that, because you can actually see which cache is used when, and if you can or should delete it or not. User component has been completely rewritten. Like again, these things, they look the same, but the code is completely different. It's all Nooku Framework. And what we're going to do here is add user group support so that you can create user groups, and then the next step and final step is add an ACL component so that you can start defining ACLs quite easily. Okay, so that's one thing. Now, the other that I want to show is, of course, Nooku Desktop itself. So this is the desktop application. What you will see here is that this is a connection to our demo site. And the internet might be a little bit slow, so, what? Oh, it's okay. Yeah? Okay. I get more juice. Thank you. Yeah, this is so simple logging in into our demo site. If you install Nooku Desktop, which is on our blog, if you go to the blog, you can find the download link. Then there is a sample link to Nooku, to our demo in there. This demo is running the previous alpha, it's running alpha 2. This is my local setup. And in here you see that Nooku Desktop knows that this site, this physical installation, has two sites, a default and a site 1. What I'm doing here is I'm logging in into this site with, and I'll show it to you here. I have a test user, and this test user in the default, this test user is a manager. And if I go to inside this site, and if you go to, yeah, this is also something cool. When you're logged in and your user has access to different sites, you can just switch between them. So in the other site, in the site 1, this user is an administrator. So what I'm doing here is I'm logging in as test user. You can see that here, this is test, and the password is test on this connection. If I go to the default, then this is a manager, and you can only see what a manager can see. And if I go to site 1, this user becomes an administrator, and he can administrate the site, and he has permissions for an administrator. Right? So this is a complete multi-site environment. You can create as many sites as you want, and then you can give users access to those sites, and they can manage it from this desktop application. What extras does that give? It gives you things like I'll show it here because it's not going to. So you can do extra things here. For example, this scroll bar on the left, I'm not sure it was 100% clear, but this scroll bar has been styled with Css3 instead of a normal scroll bar. And this is stuff that WebKit specifically supports. Other browsers don't do that yet. So these are small advantages that you get from using it in Nooku Desktop. The big advantage here, and this is all stuff that we're not using yet, the big advantage here is that you're working in a context which is the titanium context. The titanium framework runs below here. And you get very nice extra APIs out of the box. For example, there is a whole CouchDB database in here that you could use. For what? What? Well, imagine that you could create a desktop application to manage something that can run offline. Okay? So I'm not connected to the internet, but I want to edit an article or want to submit an article. Right? So I type my article, I click save. It's not going to send it to the server because there is no connection. So it's going to store it locally in a CouchDB database. And that's my hour that is done. Thank you. So it's going to store it in the CouchDB database. The moment that I connect, I go online, the application will send it to the server, for example. Other things that you could do is you could start doing push principles and auto-updating. Instead of, if something happens on the server, then you could get a notification here that another user edited something. Do we have a mic?
Just asking here for this first of all. In this desktop implementation here, we can see that is something like a Chrome plugin has been used in order the web server to give me actually the Joomla environment in my desktop. Is that true?
Okay. So without going into too much detail, I don't want to spook people. What you see here, I'll draw it out. What you see here, this part, that part, is what you call a web view.
Okay.
And it runs WebKit.
Okay.
So it's kind of like a browser.
Okay. Actually, Apache is serving this page to me, to my desktop.
Yes.
Okay.
But this is just a proof of concept. So what the whole idea is that at a certain point, this doesn't become a web view, but this actually is that data connection between the server and your desktop. And you're not sending HTML, but you're sending pure data.
Thank you very much. Okay. That's what I want to ask.
There you go. So I'll quickly demonstrate. This is actually stuff for tomorrow, but since people are asking questions, I'll very quickly demonstrate. Let's see here. Articles. So if you're a web browser, you want HTML. If you're a web application or a client or something like that, let's say an iPad application or a mobile application, you don't want HTML, you want this data in pure data. This is the pure data. Lines of code needed? 0. You could just connect over HTTP using basic auth, another authentication mechanism with the site, and tell it to give you this URL as JSON. And that works with any component that you write on Nooku Framework. And I'll show you tomorrow how you can not only get that data, but also how you can change it. I'll show you how to write a web service with 1 line of code and a database. You see? The future is here. Okay, more questions? Then they go quiet. There's a question in the back. You need to run. Okay. Go.
Otherwise they should, all rise up and start jumping. Right?
Exactly. Yeah, I like that. Right, running around.
Hi, congratulations.
Thank you.
I think it's a big idea.
I like big.
I'd like to ask if extensions should be built from scratch to be compatible with Nooku, or there could be any bridge or something like that that could make them compatible, an add-on.
Where's Max? He isn't here anymore. He's still hiding. Max is actually trying to do that with VirtualMart. You can do it in 3 ways. 1, at the moment, Nooku Server still supports Joomla 1.5 extensions because it's a new Joomla 1.5 distribution. So you can still install Joomla 1.5 extensions in there. Will all the magic that I showed you work? No, because it's not built on Nooku Framework. 2, you could build your extension on Nooku Framework without touching your database schema. We have an ORM that allows you to adapt your existing database schema to what Nooku expects. That's what we're doing here, which allows you to keep your existing data and just rebuild your code. That's 2. And 3, you can completely rebuild it on Nooku Framework. When you go for 2, you can also mix and match Nooku and Joomla Framework together. So you can migrate to Nooku if you want to do that. You can migrate to Nooku step by step. Does that answer the question? If extensions should be built for both, if you build an extension on Nooku Framework, that extension will run both in Nooku Server, in Joomla 1.5, and in 1.6. So you write it once, and then you use it everywhere. Okay?
How many people work on this? Are you alone?
forgot.
I think I would have gray hair, and I would probably no. I just talk about it, and then I go to the Bahamas to enjoy whatever I enjoy there, which is a lot of drinks and moussaka. How many people are working on it? There is one place that always speaks the truth, and that's Olo. So here's another thing. If you want to know how active an open source project is, then you go to Olo and you see if you can find it there. And then you can actually see who is working on it and who isn't working on it and how active these people are. So at the moment, let's see if we get a summary here. Contributors. We have a total of 28 contributors. Those are people that are working on Nooku. And of course, I'm very active. But our contributor community is actually picking up quite fast. I did a blog about that recently, and let's see if I can actually, I'll show it right here. You can do some cool things with Olo. You can actually compare projects. So you do Joomla, you do Drupal, and you do Nooku. And then you let them compare, and then what you see is that in the past 12 months, 9 developers have contributed code, committed code to Joomla. 7 developers have done so for Drupal, and 21 developers have done so for Nooku. That's 3 times more people that are working on Nooku than that are working on Joomla. Committers, we have 63 people that committed code to Joomla overall, all time, and at the moment we're at 28. So we already half of the people, half of those of Joomla overall, and we're just doing our contributors for 6 months. If you compare that graph-wise, you get something like this. This is contributor activity for Nooku. Commit-wise, you get something like that. Right?
Λοιπόν, δυνατό χειροκρότημα.